This is your First Alert Weather Breakdown, a deep dive into how weather works with meteorologist Evan Thomason.
Welcome on to the First Alert Weather Breakdown. Again, I'm meteorologist Evan Thomason. Thanks for joining us here in the episode for today. It is Thursday. Another day, another dollar. No, we got more dry conditions in store here for your Thursday and second to last day of the work week. But we're watching out for some spotty storms that could be creeping into our forecast a little bit later on in the First Alert Weather Breakdown, which we'll be thoroughly going over. But if you notice my voice is, I don't know, a little less, what's the word I'm looking for? A little more in a rush today. We're trying to get to the nitty-gritty and the fun activities here on the First Alert Weather Breakdown. We have something cool going on here for today. We have a Zoom interview with Ryan Knapp of the National Weather Service of Shreveport, who is actually on the other line, just patiently waiting in a chair. Before we get to him, we'll be talking about our local rainy forecast for the next couple of days. Today, maybe not as much. I know what you're thinking as well. Well, Evan, I don't want rain. We just got plenty of rain on Tuesday. Well, thankfully, I don't think it's going to be that much rain that really hits us over the next couple of days, but it's still going to be storms regardless that are going to be targeting a little bit of a portion of the Arklatex here for next 4 to 5 days, somewhere to that nature as well. Also, I'm trying to always see like my camera point. You know what? I bet you wouldn't even know this without looking at me thoroughly. Quick, like behind the scenes little detail, just so you know. Hold up, there, a little earpiece. I usually am not wearing this at all, so if you somehow see me, pinpointing that out, being like, Evan, what is that for? What are you doing? Well, it's for me to hear Ryan on the other end of the line. So yeah, just something we get to pinpoint anyways on the First Alert Weather Breakdown. Anyways, let's go on to the forecast, shall we? John Harvey, Toyota Skycam, here for the day today. It's a beautiful day, lots of sunshine. First of all, we got the sunshine out a lot earlier than yesterday, which is already great. No worries about any mist or any wet roadways anymore. Thankfully, this is a good dry day to fully recuperate from Tuesday, so to speak, and all that lovely rain that came for us. But anyways, we should be having a mostly dry day here for your Thursday. But again, we are watching out for some spotty storms that are coming back into the Arklatex soon. Again, feel free to leave a question, by the way, on our First Alert Weather Breakdown stream on our YouTube page as well. Not just for me, but also for Ryan coming up. You'll see when he comes back a little later. But anyways, all right, continuing on into this local forecast. So current conditions out and around the Arklatex, 79 in Shreveport. Temperatures all around in the mid-70s, almost reaching again up to 80 degrees near Shreveport, and plenty of sunshine. Here are temperatures elsewhere, 77 in Mansfield, 75 Mount Pleasant, 72 in Idabel, still the upper 60s into DeQueen, but that's all we're hanging out with here for the time being. Overall, here's how the temperatures work over the next several days. Today is pretty much I'd call it the warmest day of the work week. Highs around in the mid-80s here today. And then we have a little tiny cooling trend heading into the work week. I really want to stress on the word tiny. It's still going to be a warm day, warm conditions, so to speak, here for the weekend. But temperatures overall respectively cooler for the weekend. And let's be honest, it's May. Enjoy the cooler days of the Arklatex while we have them, okay? The summer heat and humidity has kind of been put at bay, at least for a little bit longer, until we get into next week. Notice how I've upgraded the word from warm to hot. Yes, we're expecting some very toasty temperatures to work back into the Arklatex here with lots and lots of that good Arklatex humidity into next week. That's especially once we get things dry as well, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But let's give you some numbers of what we're expecting rather than just saying respectively hot, cold, and cool. Cool, Evan. 84 here for this afternoon. Overall highs are expected in the low to mid-80s. I will say there's a hint of maybe us reaching up to 90 degrees down towards Natchitoches for this afternoon. Then for tomorrow morning, morning lows is similar to that of this morning. Upper 50s, lower 60s all around the Arklatex before we start cooling down Friday afternoon. If you notice, temperatures struggling to reach 80 degrees. Some of us might not. And I think if you won't reach 80 degrees on Friday, you're definitely going to not reach 80 degrees on Saturday. Most of our highs in the mid to maybe upper 70s on that day. Here's kind of the setup of what's affecting our rain. So that's kind of the rule of temperatures here over the next several days before temperatures eventually start to rise next week. We'll look at that further in the 7-day forecast. But let's look at our setup here for today. Low pressure system is just off to our east. Believe it or not, this is the same system that gave us all that bundle of wet weather here this past Tuesday. It's been kind of camping out, and now it has stalled out and is frozen just off to our east. Well, I guess, that's good because we don't get the bulk of the flash flooding, which is still hitting areas off to our south and east. But unfortunately, with the rotation of this low-pressure system and with how powerful this low-pressure system is, it's still looking to rotate in a few afternoon groups of thunderstorms here over the next several days. Yes, days plural. Unfortunately, this low-pressure system is going to be kind of camped out right to our east. Unfortunately, it looks like almost through Monday because we got pop-up showers expected pretty much each and every single day into the Arklatex over the next several days. Last thing I want to mention: look at the orientation of the arrows and where they're coming from. This is going to be rotating around the low, so these storms are going to be coming from kind of an unusual direction because usually what we find is our storms moving from west to east. That's maybe not necessarily the orientation you'll find here, though, over the next couple of days. For today, hey, we might get lucky. There could be a stray shower, maybe on the outskirts of the region. If you look, there's greater chances of rain further up in Arkansas and Oklahoma today. That could maybe creep into the Arklatex later. But overall, I think we'll hold out with some dry conditions here for your Friday. Not going to be the case we're going to be holding out dry for Thursday. That's not going to be the case as much for Friday, though. Watching out again for those pop-up showers that could be anywhere around the Arklatex here for your Friday afternoon, maybe into your Friday evening as well. Then heading into Saturday, looks like we got a good amount of cloud cover building into the Arklatex, but actually the bulk of the rain, at least for that day, looks to hold firm off to our east before some of it could rotate in here for early Sunday. Again, look at that orientation, east to west. Kind of an unusual thing to look at, especially if you're looking on that Doppler radar. So overall, let's take a look at another future track that goes a little bit beyond that. Again, we have the slight storms coming in for Friday. It looks like it's mostly dry in for Saturday before working in a couple storms in for Sunday. And some of that could continue into Monday. One last day before it looks like Tuesday and Wednesday is when we finally start to dry things up around here. Now, I do want to reassure you, even though I've shown you quite a number of storms here over the next couple of days, thankfully nothing is looking to bring us at least a major chance of severe weather at all. I'm just looking at pockets of heavy rain, which I know several of our areas are already flooded out, and that could force maybe little tiny batches of flash flooding in there, especially with how saturated and incredibly saturated we are. But I don't think it's going to provide anything more than that. I could be wrong. Anyways, rain chances over the next couple days. You'll see they're fairly low. Again, we're not expecting a major push of rain into the Arklatex each day. It's just a few storms to watch out for each and every day, mainly Friday through Monday. 40% chance of storms if you're specifically paying attention to your weekend. 40% chance of storms here for your Sunday. 20% here for Saturday. Although I will say, enjoy these weekends while the temperature is especially below 80 degrees. I really enjoyed that last week and actually helped somebody move, and that was something I was actually talking about to the person I moved with. I was like, you pretty much picked the perfect weekend to move all of your stuff before, rain or heat settles in, because that was not present pretty much this past weekend at all. It was almost perfect. Unfortunately, it looks like we are getting some chances of rain here for this coming weekend for you to watch out for. Not a massive chance, but just a few pop-up cells, but the highs still stay below 80 degrees. At least for this weekend. Maybe not the case for the following weekend, though, because once we fully dry things out heading into next week, almost boom goes the dynamite to our temperatures. We get highs up to 90 degrees settling in here by Wednesday of next week. Again, today's the warmest day of the work week. Highs are up to 85, but then we got 3 straight days where highs are below 80. Friday through Sunday, we start to warm up again on Monday, and then 90 by Wednesday. And some of that could even continue into the second half of next week as well. We're kind of watching out for maybe another system creeping in here in the 12-day forecast that's, as of last check on what I've seen for the long-term forecasts, that's looking to appear somewhere between Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of next week. We'll see. That's a little too far in the future to let you know, but We're watching out for another kind of major chance of rain, honestly, creeping in somewhere around there. But things could differ. Things could happen. Things could change. We've seen that aplenty with our rain chances, honestly, for the weekend, believe it or not. So we'll see. All right, last thing before we leave and head to quick commercial break. We'll have Ryan Knapp again on the other line. All right, we're going to join him after a quick commercial break. If you have any questions, feel free to ask on our YouTube page. We're going to be talking about the upcoming hurricane season here for this coming year. It's May. I just realized that kind of today, that like settled into my brain. And then I was like, wait a minute. June, hurricane season next year. In fact, we just had a story today where I believe there was one storm has formed every single May before the season. So they're actually thinking about maybe extending the season into May. I don't know. But anyways, the point is tropical season's coming up soon. All right, we'll talk with Ryan after this break. We'll see what he has to say, see what we have to preview for this upcoming tropical season. Ryan will be back right after a 1-minute break. See ya. Welcome on back to the First Alert Weather Breakdown. You'll see me in just a second, but I'm giving Ryan a chance and a heads up to let him know that we're live. Welcome, Ryan Knapp with the National Weather Service. First of all, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Evan. It's good to finally be on here. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm excited to talk about the upcoming season.
And as we said before we went live on this, when we were setting this call up, weather happened. We were planning on doing this like a week, 2 weeks ago. And now we're finally able to do it here. So thanks for coming on again, and welcome on. I will say, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this, I just got to add something that's in my mind. When I'm on these podcasts, and I always have an interview person behind me, like waiting to be interviewed, especially somebody with the National Weather Service, I feel like you're critiquing my forecast when I'm just going over it, and I'm just going over with it with the people at home. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this correct? Is this correct?
Yeah, no critiquing. Just watching. We always enjoy working with our media partners, and you guys are meteorologists too, so we always value any extra insight, and it's always good to see how our forecast is sometimes interpreted, whether that be a good way or bad way. But yeah, no, it's looked good so far. After looking at the stuff this morning, everything's looking good.
Okay, good to see. Good to hear. But anyways, thanks for coming on. We're talking mainly about the hurricane season coming up, tropical season. Obviously, I kind of mentioned this again at the end of the break. It starts June 1st. It's coming up on the horizon. Obviously, we do have some predictions to kind of help us out with how it's gonna go. First of all, let's kind of recap last year a little bit and see how can this year look and compare to something of a season that happened last year? What are you expecting there?
Well, I think for starters, the big topic is the fact that the preseason outlooks are not nearly as aggressive as last season was. If you remember looking back to May and even April of last year, as we were heading into the 2024 hurricane season, we were seeing preseason outlooks that were higher than ever before. I think Colorado State last year issued their earliest or their highest early forecast on record for their April and May forecasts. There was even some forecasts that were calling for 30 plus named storms last year, and a lot of that just went into the various different types of teleconnections that go into hurricane and tropical forecasting. And overall, it was just what I would call probably a loaded gun environment, so to speak, when it came to last season and what the global models, even the climate models, were showing us. Obviously, we were pretty deep into a La Nina last year. That's different for this year, so that's a big difference. But comparatively speaking, it's a little different in the preseason forecasting for this upcoming season compared to last season. And you know, we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty. But like you talked about with last season, we were still above average. Did we reach some of those higher end values that the forecast models and the forecasts from various different agencies were showing? Not quite. We were a little bit below some of those higher end values, but we were still above average. We were actually around 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes. Obviously, everyone here in the Arklatex is very familiar with Beryl last year. And I know that's something we talked about before we even hopped on the line.
Yeah, it definitely is. I guess just specifically pertaining to Barrel last year, how did it provide such a severe weather outbreak to? I know we're still fairly near the coast, but it was only what. I know you usually don't want to measure these tropical systems just by their wind speeds alone and go to show with Barrel's power, obviously what it did to the Arklatex. But how can we describe what happened from Beryl and why it left such a drastic impact, and especially so many record-breaking tornado warnings to the Arklatex last year?
Yeah, I mean, even before it even got anywhere close to the Gulf of Mexico, before it even got close to the Arklatex, I mean, Beryl was already breaking records. It was the earliest Cat 5 in the Atlantic Basin on record. Obviously, it was the second named storm of the year. And it had a lot of people really kind of shaking because, to have a storm that strong that early in the season, in a season where we were expecting, record breaking numbers in the forecast, it had a lot of people, a lot of uncertainty as to what was going to happen for the remainder of the season. Now, obviously, Beryl got weaker. It encountered some shears. It got closer to the Yucatan Peninsula and made landfall as a Category 1 along the Texas coast, Middle Texas coast around Matagorda. Now, as it got into the Arklatex, it just continued to weaken because of friction over land. But what's interesting is the placement of where Beryl was in reference to the Arklatex. We had just a kind of a really good distance, I would say. There's a lot of studies going into the distance of tornado events and tornado tracks from the center of tropical cyclones. There's been some studies that say, somewhere on the average of 50 to 100 miles away from the center is where you can sometimes see those tornado tracks. Obviously, sometimes they can be a lot closer. Um, but we were just kind of in a perfect environment overall for Beryl to produce the tornado threat. You also got to think that the tornado environment that we had was during peak daytime. That entire event was during the peak daytime period. So overall, again, our office issued 67 tornado warnings over a roughly 8-hour period, and we verified about 43 of those, which is unheard of. And one of those tornadoes, the one that moved through Bossier, close to Barksdale Air Force Base, at the time, before I want to say it was either Milton or Helene, one of those two storms resulted in one of the longest tropical produced tornado tracks on record. So it was that long track through Bossier Parish that held the record for a brief period.
God, I remember that track. It was miles long, almost. I would say stretching along a good vast portion of the parish, not just what we saw, for example, from this past Tuesday, which was what just I don't want to say a couple blocks, but I want to say like a half mile. The tornado was reported in Keithville back on Tuesday, I believe.
Oh, on Tuesday, yeah, our survey crews just finished that up
Yeah.
yesterday. It was roughly about 12 miles start to finish. So,
Oh.
we had at least as from I would say just kind of west of I think it was 169, and then it got close to 132 before lifting, or 3132 before lifting. So, yeah, the track of that was crazy, and that whole event in general, I've never seen so many, um, you know, rotation couplets all at one time associated with the tropical system. And on top of that, the amount of debris signatures we saw on the radar at one point, which allowed for us to do radar confirmed tornadoes, which made it very easy for us to go out and survey over the 2 or 3 day period that we ended up surveying after the event to try to catch up.
Wow. Yeah, I bet that took a while. So, anyways, I guess pertaining to this season, you mentioned something about El Nino and La Nina. I think everybody always knows that they have a relation to how the tropical season is expected to perform, but kind of forget how that relationship works. So, can you kind of remind us exactly what the relationship is, and what exactly is El Nino and La Nina? I hear all these words. Maybe I'm hearing some of these words and don't know exactly what this pertains to.
Yeah, it gets thrown around a lot when it comes to the tropical season. It actually even influences our severe weather season locally. So it's a year round influence on our local weather, but it gets a lot of attention during the tropical season. Uh, Last year we were in something what's known as a La Nina, where ultimately you have cooler waters in the equatorial Pacific. So that's to the west of the continental U.S. And warmer waters in the Atlantic. And as a result, you can often see a reduction in wind shear across the tropical Atlantic and the Western Caribbean, which actually helps hurricanes. We often talk about, you'll hear, Evan talk on, TV about, wind shear in the environment when it comes to severe weather. You'll see it in our forecast discussions. So it's helpful for, thunderstorms and severe thunderstorms. But when it comes to hurricanes, wind shear can actually destroy those storms. And more oftentimes than not, you'll see forecasters, pray for wind shear to disrupt the system before it gets closer to land. Now, when we talk about El Nino, it's the opposite. You often see cooler waters in the Atlantic, warmer waters in the equatorial Pacific, and in return, you kind of see a flop in that, in the sense where the Eastern Pacific activity is a little bit more aggressive compared to the tropical Atlantic. On record, the uh, La Nina event actually results in more tropical activity across the Atlantic when compared to El Nino events. So, what's interesting and what makes this forecast for this upcoming season rather difficult for forecasters is the fact that we're not really in one or the other. We're kind of right in the middle there, in what's called an ENSO neutral phase. So you're not exactly in La Nina, you're not exactly in El Nino, you're right kind of in the middle, and you often kind of see that in transition periods. So for this upcoming season, one thing we're going to have to really watch is on what side of neutral we are going to be, whether that be the warm phase of neutral or the cool phase of neutral. Because when you're in the cool phase of neutral, you can actually get some influence that is La Nina like. So you could see the reduction in wind shear across the Western Caribbean and in the Gulf of Mexico. But you may still have some of the influences, to the farther east of the stronger trade winds that can ultimately disrupt storms or even allow for cooler, so to speak, water temperatures. So those long track storms may not be able to develop. But you may see what are called more homegrown systems closer to the coast in the Western Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico has been a big hot topic, no pun intended there, given the fact that how warm it is across the Gulf of Mexico, which can lead to events of rapid intensification closer to home.
Which is what we've seen that before. We've seen that from last year as well.
Yep.
Plenty of times.
You just got to look at Milton last year, how
Yeah.
strong Milton was. Late last season, obviously had no influence on the Arctotex, but that was borderline sub 900 millibar Category 5 major hurricane
And
down there north of the Yucatan Peninsula. So it was very impressive to see that.
I think people forget that the Milton formed off of Mexico almost. It formed off of Mexico and then became a Cat 5 just within the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, it was a very weird track. Ultimately, it had a lot to do with high pressure, sitting parked over the Arctotex. So we knew very early on that it wasn't going to influence our weather. But obviously, when you have high pressure sitting right over us, there's a good opportunity that it's going to be a little bit further off to the east, or depending on where it's ultimately moving, not influencing our area at all. Obviously, it made landfall closer to the Sarasota coastline in Florida, a little closer to my family in Fort Myers. But yeah, no, Milton was definitely an anomaly for where storms typically develop, and an anomaly in the sense of how strong it actually got.
So what I'm hearing is just kind of a little bit of an above average season. I think I've seen that from several forecasts, including what you're getting to me at, which is obviously a little cause for concern, especially with wherever the direction could go. And honestly, I think what Beryl helped me realize as well is that any of these storms during any type of the year Because usually, again, you usually find and are talking about the tropical season in September, October, late August. You're not talking about it in early July, which is when Beryl came on through. So any of these systems can form and kind of go up the coast and to hit the Arctotex. And I think that was a good ripe recipe, unfortunately, to hit our region again. I think what you're getting at as well, and you can help me rephrase my statement here, but obviously the more storms that form, period, the more chances that we have of any tropical system reaching the Arctotex with some sort of issue like we had from Beryl, and I believe we also had Florence, hit us with a good amount of a good rainy day as well. Now that it didn't leave as much of a severe weather impact, but it still gave us, again, as I said, a day worth of rain in the middle of summer where we didn't have much rain, period. So,
Yeah, so that was I remember after Beryl there was Francine, which was down there in
not
the
Florence.
New Orleans area.
Sorry.
Towards like the Slidell forecast office. But
Yeah.
In terms of the forecast for this year, I mean, a lot of the preseason forecast numbers are close to average, maybe just a little bit above average, which is typical for what you would see here. Obviously, we're now starting to get some of the May climate models in, which are showing, pretty much what we had been kind of thinking for a while now, that kind of cooler neutral phase, where, again, you're looking at a warmer Gulf of Mexico, but you're actually looking at a somewhat cooler, what we call the main development region, which is the stretch of the Atlantic Ocean from really the Leeward and Windward Islands all the way east to the coast of Africa. So that's an area that we typically watch through the season for tropical development. Again, I think the kind of main message to really write home is that we are looking at maybe a near to just slightly above average season. Obviously, NOAA's going to release their tropical forecast here on the 22nd, so we'll be looking out for that to see what those numbers are. Obviously, Colorado State, the ECMWF, and the Euro have released their forecast, and then AccuWeather released their forecast, and everyone's really kind of lingering to just a little bit above average, kind of close to what our totals were last year's.
Gotcha. All right, Ryan, I think we hit all of our bases, unless you got anything else to say.
No, I think we're all good. I appreciate you having me.
Cool. Hey, we'll have to do it again, especially once probably tropical season starts back up, especially because I'll be starting to use my graphics too. Anyways, thanks for joining, Ryan, and I believe he accidentally cut out. But anyways, it's great to hear from him. Props out to Ryan again for coming on the First Alert Weather Breakdown. Yeah, we'll have to have him back again soon. Appreciate him for coming along. Cool. So, all right. Thanks for watching the First Alert Weather Breakdown. We're going to go over a weekend forecast here for tomorrow. Not just for in the Arctotex, but also areas around the Arctotex too. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, I will have to talk to you all later. Have a great rest of your day. Tomorrow, 10:30, be there, be square. Most importantly, be weather aware. Thanks for watching today's First Alert Weather Breakdown again, especially with Ryan. Yeah, as I said, we'll have to always love talking with the National Weather Service. We'll have him on. Him and I forget who the other I'll remember the other person we talked. Anyways, National Weather Service. Great people, great friends, period. More than the coworkers. All right, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you again tomorrow, 10:30 on Friday. Peace out.